Welcome, everybody, to the latest edition of the Endurance Life 360 podcast. I'm your host, Coach Jay Ridgway, and today I am super excited and, quite frankly, honored to have on our next guest who has been a successful banking executive, loving husband, father, an athlete, and specifically a challenged athlete, and quite frankly, a board member of the Challenge Athletes Foundation, and someone who I am honored to be able to call my friend, longtime friend, Alan Shanken. Alan Shank, welcome, my
Hey,
friend. How you doing?
Jay, it's a pleasure, buddy. This is really an honor to be on, to get together and chat and reminisce and, talk about what's going on. So
Yeah.
thank you for having me.
Well, I know we've got a lot to cover, and I think a lot of the audience here that will probably be listening, hopefully knows you, especially those that are in the Northern California Bay Area region. But we have a lot of history together. We go back quite a few years, 13, 14 years now. But I wanted to catch up
Sure.
with you. Just great times. I know we recently caught up and we had a
Mhm.
good conversation, but there's a couple of things that I think are important to the audience here, just to kind of get an idea of the background here. You've had great success, but some people don't know your history and stuff. And so I want
Mhm.
to kind of walk through that in the beginning, just to say, where'd you grow
Mhm.
up?
Right.
What were some of the challenges of that? So I know you're a resident in San Francisco, a longtime resident, but
Yep.
where'd you grow up, Alan?
So I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona.
Mm.
I went to grade school, and high school in Phoenix, um, Valley of the Sun. I think the summers were like an average of 110 degrees or something. It's crazy. Um, Went to the University of Arizona.
Mm.
Uh,
Wildcats.
gr- yeah, Wildcats, a phenomenal basketball school. I guess you can grab a diploma from time to time out of that place. Um, but and I graduated in 1982, and shortly after that, I found myself in the Bay Area, um, and I started my career. And I thought I'd be here for about a year or two, and essentially 40 years later,
Yeah.
I haven't actually moved back into the room that my mother has sort of waiting for me to come back to. So, so but anyway, no. So I've been in the Bay Area now close to 40 years. Um, so that's where I grew up.
Outstanding. Let's talk a little bit about, I know you and I were just chatting before this started recording about, you've had some success, some great
Hmm.
success when you eventually ventured into the world of endurance sports.
Hmm.
And I know there's been the transition there, some highs and lows of that. And I kind of want to touch on that. Like, how did you get
Hmm.
involved in that? I mean, because it's something that we'll talk about, the challenged athlete side of it, because
Sure.
you're a congenital below the knee amputee. Um,
Right.
so, let's talk about, what was your first endurance event, and then kind of go and then reel it back into what were the
Hmm.
challenges as you growing up, having had that disability.
Well, it's a great question, Jay, and I'm glad you set the table there with that. So my first my first triathlon was in 2001, and and it was really interesting because I swam on a swim team when I was a really young kid. I
Mm.
think I actually quit when I was about 10 years old. Probably the biggest mistake I ever made was really not being a avid or an active athlete, like a high school competitive athlete. Because as an amputee, certainly there are certainly amputees that have my same situation, that have played high school football, have played high school basketball and baseball and such, particularly now in this era because the prosthetics are so incredible. But was not when I was a kid, I definitely regret not sticking out swimming, but I did pick it back up in my 30s and 40s. And I actually started just doing 25 yards at a time and eventually became a pretty avid long distance swimmer at one point. But I had been enamored by just the whole swim bike run thing.
Yeah.
And in '01, somehow I got convinced to try to do an Olympic distance triathlon. And I think a friend of mine had done team and training. So I decided at that time to drink a little of that Kool-Aid and and go to a class, go to a like an introductory thing,
Yeah.
and that turned itself into being able to complete. Um, I don't remember. Jay, you'll know the name. I don't remember it. It's the one down in Monterey. It's
Pacific Grove. Pacific
yeah, the
Grove.
Pacific Grove Triathlon. So I
Yeah.
did that in 2001, and it was great. My son was there at the time. He was 11.
Hmm.
He's now 30. Now he's now 33. My parents came in for it. I had a little fan club that came and watched, and it was actually before I even knew about what they call running blades or prosthetic devices
Yeah.
that are designed for running. So I ran that 6.2 miles on a what's it called, walking prosthetic leg, and got
Wow.
through it. But um, but yeah, but I had started swimming a bunch, and I just just swimming in pools, and then I met the team and training people. They turned me on to the triathlon world, and uh, and that's kind of how my endeavors in triathlon started. Hmm.
Yeah. So the interesting thing you touched on that. I mean, I had no idea that you did you had to do the triathlon, the Pacific Grove Triathlon. You're swimming through the kelp. It's the kelp crawl triathlon,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah. And then you got on the bike, and I'm assuming you had a prosthetic that was designed for biking at that time. I mean, I don't know where technology was in 2001. It wasn't
It
as
really
advanced as it
wasn't.
is now, right?
No, but it's funny because I started as a total neophyte. I started. I really didn't even know about clip-ins or cycling jerseys, or, you know, that it's better to be thin than heavy. Like I didn't know any of that stuff when I started, and I didn't know about wearing all that tight fitting cycling gear that people wear. Even when makes thin guys look fat. That stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, no, I actually used a regular. You can actually get away with a regular for a below knee amputee. You can actually get away with a regular walking leg to cycle in, as long as the shoes accommodate the pedals. So that's how it worked. But one of the difficult parts of any triathlon for an amputee are the transitions, because think about even Escape from Alcatraz, which is our neighborhood iconic race that they do every year, and I guess they're doing it in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Um, you get this when you have to stop after the sand. You've got to stop for a moment, get that sand off of your leg, and then you've got to whip off your wetsuit, and that takes a little time. I mean, the transitions for an amputee are somewhat more timely.
Yep.
So, so the transitions are always a little bit rough until you get down to a science.
Yeah. So what's interesting there, and that's fascinating, that just the evolution of, as you know, Alan, we'll talk a little bit more about
Mhm.
CIF and then my involvement with that and coaching some pretty
Sure.
phenomenal athletes, even still doing that today, as you and I'll talk about towards the later half of this. But um let's go back and reel back to the childhood, which is my main point of kind of bringing
Uh-huh.
up, your first triathlon.
Yeah.
At least you had the walking leg at this point to be able to
Right.
ride and push versus push and pull on
Right.
pedals to get through the bike of the Pac Grove Triathlon, and then you obviously transition with that same leg, not a running
Yeah.
blade, that same leg, and you power through the run. Let's talk about that childhood there, because I can only imagine back in the day there wasn't a lot there. There wasn't a lot of
So
education. There wasn't a lot of support, was there?
no, there really wasn't. But I want to make sure I understand one point. When you pedal, you actually push and pull. Is that how it works?
Yes. Yeah. Well, when you're clipped in, my friend, yes. When you're clipped in,
Okay. Okay.
you're
Thanks for
supposed
the
to do the
clarification.
pull part just as the push.
I wasn't exactly sure. Um, but it's interesting because as a kid, so obviously I'm in my 60s now, but as a kid, it was all about ball related sports, basketball, football,
Mhm.
baseball, and that kind of stuff.
Right.
Um, and uh, and the prosthetics, I use the term that I've seen prosthetics evolve from basically wood shop to what is now robotics, and I've seen this whole evolution. And when I was younger, I never really had a prosthetic leg that fit me well enough to run at any great distance. In fact, I had when I was in eighth grade, I had to have a really significant corrective surgery. I had it on my Christmas break of my eighth grade year in grade school. And eighth grade is kind of like a cool year for most people because you're kind of hitting your stride in lots of different ways, and you're thinking about high school, and my Christmas break was spent having the surgery where I was in the hospital for 5 days, where they had to break my leg in a couple different places intentionally and reset it,
Wow.
and then I had to go back to school after the Christmas holiday, and a full length cast on my side that doesn't have a foot. So it was kind of I felt like I was a little bit of a walking car crash where people didn't really want to look at me, but they were definitely staring at me. And that was actually a pretty impactful time back in when I was 13 years old. But anyway, I was actually a relatively good basketball player, and I played a lot of pickup basketball with a prosthetic leg, and I was never able to make my eighth grade team. Although I will tell you, I was the fourth grade free throw shooting champion. And I was a fourth grade free throw shooting champion, but I never really made my grade school basketball teams. Um, and then in eighth grade, when I had the surgery, I came back, and the prosthetics were really not right. Like I really kind of wanted to go out for my high school freshman team, but what was happening is, as I was running, I could run for up and down the court, a bunch, but eventually I would get these abrasions where my skin would be breaking down.
Yeah.
So I never really had the capacity to do anything. It gets back to my one real regret in sports is that I would never have had that issue if I was a swimmer. So I
Yeah.
could have just been a good one-legged, you can kick with one leg and be somewhat competitive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but anyway, so I never played any high school sports. I never played. In fact, it was always kind of intimidating to me to go out for a team because I just didn't really have this. Either I didn't have the hand-eye coordination, or the reality is I didn't really have the confidence to be part of that. So that whole teamwork thing that I think a lot of people um, develop as kids, um, that was a that was not my thing, which is odd because when I think about it now, I'm really involved in athletics. I do everything I can to be part of teams, whatever they may be, whether
Yeah.
it be business or my charity related work or sports related stuff, or
Yeah.
whether I'm playing. So no matter what kind of sport I'm involved with now, I like the camaraderie, and I like the things you learn from team sports. So
Yeah, yeah, and I'm hesitant to move into. I want to touch on that when we get into the CAF, the Challenge Athletes
yeah.
Foundation piece, and your involvement there. But it's fascinating to me just knowing you, obviously in the not in your childhood time, but obviously once you got
Mhm.
involved with CAF, and just the level of confidence and the love and the energy just is so powerful with you, being
Yeah.
your friend. But just even
Mhm.
if I wasn't your friend, just meeting you, that there's just that confidence just is overwhelming, and I think many of the folks that are on this the audience here that are watching this, who or know you, can probably
Mhm.
attest and agree to that. But just it's fascinating because of the challenges of your youth, and the fact that were you chose not to, and I don't know if it was really your choice or if you just
Mhm.
didn't have a choice to participate in those high school sports because of
Mhm.
the disadvantage, if you
Yeah.
will, and the stigma. I don't even know if that's the right word or not there, but the
Mhm.
fast forward to where you are now and what you've
Mhm.
achieved is just really, really just freaking cool to me and fascinating to me to have to come along there. Do you want to touch on a little bit into that?
Yeah, sure. It's an interesting, I don't know, I call it a metamorphosis in many ways because, I, if you're not part of, like, I believe like being part of a community, it's just a really healthy,
Yeah,
is a really healthy part of life. You learn a lot of life skills. So in the since I really never went on a high school team, and I was never really an athlete that way, and I really wasn't a joiner, so to speak. I was more of a loner. Um, that I think that somewhere along the line, a light bulb went off and things changed. And a lot of that had to do, honestly, in my early 40s when I found the Challenge Athletes Foundation. I think um, I realized that when you peel back the onion, that I had the tools to really become a leader in this group of folks that were physically challenged. And it's kind of how I started the whole being involved with CAF.
yeah,
but I went from being kind of a little bit of a maybe a wallflower, so to speak, or just really not that assertive as a youth because I didn't really belong. I was sort of a, I wasn't, like in high school, people group themselves, right? And they range from like being a total stoner to being a total jock and an academic, and everybody falls, everybody's sort of on the continuum of somewhere there.
Yeah.
So I really kind of didn't really have that. So anyway, the point being is that eventually I found my way, and I do believe that athletics as an adult was a real game changer for me.
Yeah.
Um, because what's the community? That could be the people like in your like look at what you created with Pac West, right? You created a community, and the people who are part of that, whether it be the boot camp or the triathletes or the elite triathletes or the beginner triathletes, it really doesn't matter. You're part of this organization, and you're taking there's a greater good there, and you've got the weak athletes pulling for the great athletes. You've got the great athletes pulling for the weak athletes, and it's unified, and it's really what teamwork is all about. And frankly, Pac that's what Pac West was. So, um,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'll just be honest. When you say that, the words family come to me. At one
mhm,
point, in the
mhm,
heyday and the peak of Pac West, that was my
mhm.
family, right?
Yeah,
You wake up in the morning, you're training with these people, you're sweating blood, sweat, and tears. Same things happening in the evening, and then all of a sudden we all come together for the races. Whether it's a road
right.
race, marathon or whatever that may be,
Mhm.
half marathon with all the pacing duties we did. By
Oh
the way,
yeah.
did you ever
So,
did you ever pace for me? By the way, I don't know if I ever
no, I
asked.
don't think I was ever strong enough to pace for you, but I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
paced. But there was a race, and I can't remember which one. I think it was the Giants race. I was paced by you. Um, and though I love that was one, I know that you were deeply involved with the Giants half marathon, and maybe you still are.
Yeah,
That
they
was
got rid
my,
of it. They got rid of it after COVID. It's just
is that
10K
right?
5K now. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So the half marathon, I think, I mean, that half marathon and then the other half marathon, like there's two fantastic half marathons in the Bay Area that are basically as flat as you can be. One is the Giants race, and I actually
San
think the
Jose.
other one,
San Jose.
well, that one too that I've done. Yeah, that was one actually that you guys paced me for, and I loved that. It was sub 2 hours, so I was really happy about that.
Yep, yep.
And then there was another one. What's the one on Super Bowl Sunday, the Kaiser? I don't know if you're involved in
The
that one
Kaiser.
anymore.
Yeah, the Kaiser half. Yep,
That's a pretty flat race too. So those are, we live in this land of hills, but
yep.
those are the three races that are as pancake flat as the city could possibly be.
Yeah. So let's talk about a little bit about that, and then we'll move into the CAF piece. But
Sure.
give me the sort of the high level successes you've had as an athlete. I mean, I know that there's an endurance athlete, and then I'm gonna force you to say, well, what happened to those endurance days for me? Because I was your coach at one point, right?
Yeah,
So what
100%.
you had some Ironmans in your belt. I don't know about full Ironmans, but definitely 70.3s. Kind of refresh my
Yes.
memory here.
Yeah. So in the triathlon world, Escape from Alcatraz,
Yep,
I've probably done that either as a relay or on my own 8 or 9 times.
yep.
And then I've done numerous 70.3s, and that's kind of where I tapped out. I didn't really go further than that as far as distance is concerned. Um, and then other things I've done, I've been part of the New York City Marathon Swim. It's a swim around marathon. It's a marathon swim. It's 28 miles that you do
What?
you do in the form of a relay.
Yeah,
That I've done twice. I did it in the 2004 and 2007. I've done the Tahoe swim a few times. I guess that's a 12-mile swim in the form of
yep.
a relay.
Across. Yep.
I've swam Alcatraz, infinite number of times. So either organized or on my own. So and then through the Challenge Athletes Foundation, I would say that you and I together, when you were the coach of the our fundraising efforts to the back to back. So that was 240 miles over 3 days.
Yep.
We did that two times I think together, Jay, and then we did I did the MDC, which is called stands for the $1 Million Challenge, which is a ride from San Francisco to San Diego over a 7-day period of time. And then there's been numerous half marathons, one marathon. Well, I did the New York City Marathon twice. Once I actually had to bail after about mile 21 just due to injury.
Yeah.
My wife was pacing me the whole way, and then it was just a cold day. Um, and then I had a calf problem on my good side, and I got to be really careful on that. I don't want to blow out a calf
Yeah.
when I only have one.
Yeah.
So and then I came back the next year and finished and completed the, from start to finish, and did the New
Yep.
York City Marathon. So and then but I do my favorite distance in running has been the half marathon. I just love that race because it
Yep.
gives you a little opportunity to do everything,
Love it.
sprint, pace, the whole shebang. So yeah, I've done my fair share of endurance races, and then over the years I've been on the master swim teams.
Yep.
Mostly when I lived in the East Bay, I was part of a gym there before I moved to the city. And I used to compete in the masters meets from time to time, and I really enjoyed that. Again, that was and being part of all of these things to me is being on a team. It's not something I didn't have when I was a kid, whether it be a master's team when I was in the East Bay, team in training, another example, being clearly, obviously, part of Pac West, being part of a team.
Yep.
So, I mean, it just all feels better. It just feels better to have the camaraderie. Um,
Yeah. I mean, and again, I think that's where let's move on into CAF now. I think
mhm.
that's where you found your calling, if I may, my friend.
Yeah.
Because of your childhood and your experience there, it's almost like you took a baton that had not,
Mhm.
at least in the Bay Area, and I can't
Mhm.
speak because CAF is out of San Diego, and
Mhm.
the amazing staff that's there that I've had pleasures of calling
Mhm.
friends, and I know some have come and gone, some
Uh-huh.
turnover there, but you've taken that baton and you have not just walked with that baton, you have
Yeah.
sprinted with that baton to try to
Mhm.
spread the mission, the message, and the vision and the purpose of CAF, the Challenge Athletes
Mhm.
Foundation, so that
Mhm.
youth like you, when you were growing up, have more resources and more hope and more enjoyment in their childhood to live as normal a life as you can possibly be with the technology and the resources there now. And you're part of that success of what CAF has done at a global level, let's be honest here, right?
Well, I appreciate that, and yeah. So my CAF plight is really an interesting one. So um,
How did it all
I don't even
begin? How did it all
yeah
begin?
I don't even think you know the story, Jay, but it was I think 2006. And I'm walking and I'm out watching just as a spectator. I'd never done a triathlon other than the team and training one. And I'm just watching the Escape from Alcatraz Triathlon as a spectator. As you know, they have these expo booths,
Yeah.
and it could be Sports Basement, it could be Pac West, it could be any one of a variety of things, hawking their goods. So CAF happened to have an expo booth, and it was really interesting. So Challenge Athletes Foundation, what is this? I never heard about this thing. I lived my entire life as an amputee, and a relatively solid weekend warrior athlete. I mean, if I wasn't swimming, I was lifting or doing other things. So I wasn't, totally a couch potato. So at some point along the way, I thought I would have learned about CAF, but I had not. But anyway, so I see, like, these pictures of these athletes that are in wheelchairs and they're missing arms and missing legs, blind, and doing just amazing work
Yeah.
and you're accomplishing incredible things and training for the Paralympics and all these things that just go like, where have you been all my life? So it just so happened about what I did learn about CAF is that they're headquartered in San Diego. It just so happened that serendipity got involved here, and I happened to be going on vacation in San Diego like a week or two later.
Hmm.
So I go and I visit the headquarters and I go, this is just like the coolest thing. So we were a small organization. When I say we, I mean CAF was a relatively small organization there. They had a few people in an office,
Yeah.
and I went to go check it out. And I said, you know what, I'll see if I can like raise a little bit of money for them. So at the time, I was a pretty avid open water swimmer. I was a member of South End Rowing Club,
Yeah.
and I was doing some outdoor swimming. So CAF has this fundraising opportunity called Race for a Reason. Essentially, what that is you
Hmm.
just do a race and we'll set up a fundraising package for you, and take the team and training model, and with that team and training model, what I mean by that is you just approach your friends to kick in $100, $50, whatever they can, to
Yep.
raise a bunch of money for an effort. So on my first foray, there was an organized swim to do Alcatraz, and I think I raised like $12,000 just in whatever, just doing an event for CAF. So I got to know CAF a little bit, and through that, I got to meet another one of your athletes, Creighton Wong, if you remember
Mhm.
Creighton.
Oh
So
yeah.
I got to meet another one of your athletes, Creighton, and I know you coached him to finish which
Oceanside
70.3? Oh yeah, Oceanside
Oceanside, California,
70.3.
703. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a whole nother chapter, but that was amazing. And I got to meet Creighton, another, physically challenged athletes. So I started getting the weeds on both the athletes and the donors, and a little bit of athletes and a little bit of donors. So I'm getting supporters and donors, and I did another event to raise a little bit of money. And I go, this is getting old. So you can only hit up your friends so long.
True.
Maybe a better idea, and I don't think you know the story actually, Jay, so you're gonna love it. Another idea is to just have my friends hit up their friends. So at the time, I was friends with a guy named Jim Meisels. Jim was the CEO of Club One, and at the time, they had about 14 or 15 different gyms in the city.
Yeah.
And I said to him, we should figure out a way to do a fundraising event. He says, what do you got in mind? He's all in on, anybody who owns a gym knows about CAF. So they had like 14 different gyms. He's the CEO. So he and his the lead instructor was named Jim Karanis. They had all kinds of, at the time, it probably still is, spinning is like a cult.
Yeah.
Like your spinning instructor is part of your life.
Yeah.
So we ultimately created this event called Rock on the Green, where we brought 300 spinning bikes out to the Marina Green.
So awesome.
And yeah, it was great. And it was like a rock and roll concert. We had Challenge Athletes Foundation beneficiary of it. And we raised a lot of money. I think we netted like $100,000. And then we did that in 2000, it's 7 and 8 or 8 and 9. I can't really remember. But
Yeah.
that's when we really got to have a footprint. And that's about the same time you and I get to know each other a little bit, because I was starting to train at Shift, and when you were a coach, and then we decided that we're going to sort of change the model, and we're not going to do these outdoor rides anymore. We're going to bring it inside, and that's the first meeting you and I had. So Shift was a indoor, training facility where you bring your own bike and you get it on. It's a heart rate based training situation. And Jay and his buddies Jay and his posse were the coaches, and we went to the back room and got out a legal pad and a piece of paper, and we said, let's have a indoor. If you remember, it was 6 hours.
That
Uh,
was brutal.
yeah, it
That
was
was
brutal.
brutal.
6 hour spinathon. And then again, we're creating community. We have challenge athletes there. We've got donors there. We've got athletes there, and that's kind of how it all launched. And that's parlayed into, kind of what it is today. And there's a lot of years and a lot of people between now and then, but that's kind of all started. So the bottom line is, yes, I put the whole thing on my back for a little while, and then we found a group of really passionate ambassadors and supporters to help us today.
Yeah, two things on that. The Shift was the later part of the name. Originally, when we came on board, it was called Velo SF, Velo
Oh,
Center.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah, and so
LSL.
that part was there, and that was amazing. Where you got the professional triathletes who are friends of mine, who will hopefully I'll have a chance to have them on the show at some point. The Meredith Kesslers of the world, the Tyler Stewarts of the
Yeah.
world, and obviously some of the peer elite coaches out there, Matt Dixon and all that team. I mean, we had so many. It was such a cool venue that you saw the potential there, because it was the Pac West team, it was the Purple Patch team, it was, all of these teams were coming together, because it was a one of a kind facility. Rest in peace, it's
Right.
no longer there. But
Right.
that was a big caveat. But with that, one of the things you missed to add to that was that you took it indoors, but then you also, for a period of time, which I don't want to say I didn't come in kicking and screaming. You pulled me into what you created, which was the back-to-back century program,
Right.
which,
Mm-hmm.
for those of you that are not aware, was the Northern California major fundraising event, where you rode from Cavella Point in the tip of Sausalito, right at the base of the Golden Gate Bridge, which is a spectacular setting,
Mm-hmm.
up until Roanoke Park, Santa Rosa area, along the way for 100+ miles, spending a night at the Doubletree Hotel there with some event
Yeah.
activity, and only to turn around and do it all again on a different route, winding back up back
Mm-hmm.
at Cavella Point there. And it was a spectacular event, a lot of logistics behind that.
Mm-hmm.
But you had the Bill Waltons, the NBA, Hall of Famer. Well, I still
Yeah.
call him friend, who's still, out there kicking in names. And then tragically, we lost Robin Williams, who was an integral part of that CAF foundation, who lived along the course there, who I had the honor at one point changing his rear flat tire and
There you
dropping him
go.
off because he didn't
Yeah.
complete going in there, because he lived right off the course there, and thanking him for his time and effort. So many
Unbelievable.
great fun memories.
Tough. Yeah. Tough loss.
Me and Pac West and the athletes that
Mhm.
came and supported as ride leaders and stuff like that. So success of that event, that's no longer there. Let's talk about what's happening now. I mean, we didn't talk about, you had your endurance side of it.
Yeah.
I was going to joke with you. It's like, well, what are you doing now from an athletic standpoint? Hopefully you're still swimming. Hopefully you're still getting
Yes.
on your bike every once in a while, Alan. But what are you doing now? What are you doing now? And
Um,
how does that impact?
so,
Yeah.
so, um, so I've changed my tune just a little bit. I'm still avidly swimming. I'm a little more of a gym rat where I'm, weightlifting and doing my fair share of indoor cycling and things like indoor cycling, lifting, do a lot of weight routine, do a pretty strong strength routine.
Yeah.
I picked up this really bad four-letter word called golf. Um, and so I'm going to a little bit different type of hand-eye coordination.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting because you brought this to my attention in our pregame, having to do like, yes, I'm into golf, but I'm also making certain that adaptive golf is available
Yeah.
to our community in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
So the Olympic Club is going to host its second adaptive golf clinic in a couple weeks. Excuse me, it's on June 5th, and essentially what that is 24 different folks are going to be coached by the top adaptive golf instructors in the country to learn how to play golf.
Yeah.
And we've got the folks that are registered as young as 5, as old as 75. The disabilities we're dealing with involve hand issues, polio. Eight of our athletes are in wheelchairs, and they're going to be attached to what they call a solo rider.
Wow.
That they give them an opportunity to learn how to swing a club, and that solo rider is something that can actually is certifiable to go on putting greens and such. So it's interesting because I didn't think about it till you just mentioned it, but I kind of did the same thing for the adaptive athlete community in the swim, bike, and run world.
Yeah.
And one of the beautiful things that we talk about is that the reason that CAF was started basically swim, bike, and run. Our first event that we ever did, we're headquartered in San Diego.
Yeah.
Our world headquarters are in San Diego, and they did a triathlon as a fundraiser to get a van for Jim McLaren, who's a disabled athlete who this whole thing was based upon.
Yeah.
And one of the great things about the sport of triathlon is that some people can swim, or they can run, or they can bike. Some people can do all three. One of the best races I've ever had is as a relay. I've done the Escape from Alcatraz as a relay many times, and it's frankly it's a lot more fun. Not because not because it's easier, it is easier. Um, but it's always great to pull for somebody.
Yeah.
It's always great to look at life in a way it's a little bit bigger than you yourself.
Yeah.
And even if it's just a team of 3, it's bigger than you yourself. So that's one of the great, I think, untold stories about triathlon, that it can actually be a team sport, and it's a heck of fun team sport too.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, right now, that's what I'm focusing on now. I'm focusing a little bit on golf. I know I'm going to get back into endurance sports at some point. I think I want it to be running. It's going to be my next thing, and I'll figure out a way probably to get back into triathlon.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like look at Ed. I mean, he's 80 years old and he's still at it. He's one of your athletes, and he's a big CAF advocate, and he's a mentor to so many disabled athletes out there. So it's a really good thing.
Yeah, I'll just since you brought up Dr. Ed, so just real quick, he's an athlete of mine I'm currently coaching. He's attempting his 3rd attempt to complete the Alcatraz Triathlon in a couple weeks here. First one, he had a bad crash and conditions cut off. Ended up fracturing his hip on the bike. Came back from that, super strong going into last year. And you can appreciate this, Alan, as a challenge athlete. And us able bodies don't realize the complexity that's involved in multi-sport. And I can appreciate you why I just want to do the relay component. He gets out of the water, successfully swims for the second time out of the water. For those that don't know, Escape from Alcatraz, you're in the freaking San Francisco Bay, jumping off a perfectly sound boat, 10, 12 feet into the bay water from off the shore of Alcatraz Island. And you're swimming a mile and a half, dealing with all the currents and the chop and the wind and siding issues and the fog and all kinds of craziness going on there. He successfully gets out of the water, gets out of the sand, brushes it off like you talked about earlier on, gets to the marina green to his bike, forgets a crucial pin that is absolutely necessary for him to be able to cycle on his bike. His race was done. So here we are, fast forward now, and now I'm heavily in his grill, and he's been kicking ass and taking names and training his butt off. He turns 80, everybody, on the 2nd of next week. And a week later, he's on the line, jumping off the boat and doing this thing. So knock on wood, fingers crossed for Dr. Ed. OBGYN, Alta Bates Summit Medical Center in Berkeley for decades. Today, I told you in the pregame where I'm up, he's celebrating, I think, today after being on-call doctor duty since 1972 as a resident. Today is his last day of being on call as he finally sunsets his career there. So anyway, super amazing athlete who was a late-staged amputee through accident. He was an avid motorcyclist. He would always ride his motorcycle to the hospital. He was taking it near my office in Berkeley, my wife and I's office in Berkeley. He was hit by a truck, taking it to the shop to be repaired, completely blacked out and doesn't know it, but he was forced to have a below the knee amputee on it. So here he is in his 70s. This is like 4 or 5, 6 years ago. He's in that situation. I'm visiting him in the hospital. He's got unbelievable positive attitude, but I was like, okay, how do I give him the infrastructure that I know I can't give him? The first call that I made him make, or the first call that I made on his behalf, was to this gentleman who's on the other side of the screen here, from me to say, Alan, I need you. I need some help. I've got an athlete here. And then here we are. Fast forward now. Ed is representing CAF. He's fundraised. He's completed his fundraising dollars. More importantly, Alan, as a board member, he completed his fundraising minimum.
Way to go, Ed.
That may be, and he's racing, in a couple of weeks, and then hopefully I'll be there to obviously cheer him on. So I've got to.
Yeah. Well, I think that actually speaks to a really interesting point, though, Jay, about the pay it forward aspect of the Challenge Athletes Foundation. We recently one of the things that I think is really amazing is that all of these physically challenged athletes, like somehow, some way, something not so good happened to them. That's why they're challenge athlete. Like I was born with this birth defect, happens about once every 80, 90,000 kids. Ed had a bad accident, and he was able-bodied his whole life, lost his leg below the knee. Many of our folks are enduring cancer, other diseases, diabetes, on and on and on. It basically always starts at the same place, a hospital bed and a difficult conversation with a physician or doctor of some sort. And then eventually, so essentially CAF becomes a bridge to the next leg of their life, because we're helping people get on with their life, in many ways not too different than the medical community. We're just using fitness as our conduit. We're just using fitness as our manner in which to get that done.
Yeah.
So anyway, the point is the pay it forward aspect. And I would say that one of the goals, it's just sort of a byproduct of what we do, is one where, there's a lot of inside voices that take over when something like that happens.
Yeah.
But if you know that you're not alone and you're out there, it seems to take care of that. We do address mental health issues as long as addressing physical health issues. But there's many people, and I'm one of them. Many ways I took the worst thing that happened in my life, could have been, to make it maybe one of the best things, because I'm using this as a foundation to help other people. And where would we be in life without trying to help somebody else out? I mean, not as good a place as if you didn't. So I'd say that there's a lot of win out there, and just like I'm helping Ed, and I helped Ed, and eventually we met and we got to know each other a little bit. He's going to help. I've teed him up with many people,
Yep.
introduced him to many people along the way that he's helping, and they're going to help out others. So it's just really this endless chain that
Yep.
of assistance and help that's really that gives everybody a hand and puts them in a position they want to be in.
Yeah, and that's great in terms of just being sensitive time to our audience. We've covered a lot here, but let's kind of narrow it back about the purpose, and you have responsibilities as a board member for obviously for CAF, and you've fulfilled on a lot of those obligations, but it doesn't stop, right? The wheel keeps turning here. So I know recently when we first connected here a number of weeks ago, you were migrating into another special event that you created that didn't necessarily require you to break a sweat,
Yeah,
right? Instead, it was requiring you to get all gussied up.
yeah.
I think it was a black tie event, right? You want to talk a little bit about
Well,
the event that you created here? So it's the third or
well,
fourth year, right?
actually, yeah. So it's not black tie because in San Francisco you can say black tie, but just like everything else in this town, there's kind of no rules. So people wear whatever they want, no matter what you put on the invitation. But
Tie dye, tie dye.
you, there were many that were dressed in whatever they want. But anyway, no. So about 6 years ago, we started doing a gala as a fundraising event and as an event for the. There's lots of good there. There's obviously the fundraising component, but it's also a social event for our athletes to meet our donors.
Yep.
So the grantees and the donors get to mix and match.
Yep.
And we've actually grown our footprint quite a bit. Um, we have an incredible woman that is our development officer, paid employee by CAF, an employee of CAF, who's part of what we're doing here. We really wouldn't. She's been amazing. And then we have another full-time employee that is a that works with the athletes. So we've got really the two legs of the stool are
Let's drop their names, Alan. Come on, what are the
oh,
names?
Susan Butler
Yep.
is the woman who is our development officer, and Eva Christoph is our athlete, our athlete person, and they're just are actually on paper it's called programs that she runs, and
Yep.
essentially that's what it is because we have programs regularly for our athletes. We have a basketball clinic that we've done with the Golden State Warriors in their practice facility in
Yep.
Oakland.
Yep.
We've done a sled hockey clinic, a curling clinic on ice. It was a
Oh,
ice
cool.
hockey and curling
Yeah.
clinic for people in wheelchairs, and we've done endless number of bike clinics and hand cycles, and now we've got this golf clinic going on. So we have a lot going on here in the Bay Area. Clay Thompson was recently involved in a grant presentation to a 16-year-old young man that was got kind of a lot of publicity not long ago. So it's yeah, we're doing a lot of really cool stuff in the Bay Area, and this gala is just one example of kind of an evening big fundraiser
Yep.
that we had, and because the funds are really needed, to make sure that because we never want to say no to a grantee who's asking for a little bit of financial assistance.
Yep.
Um, so they're super important components of what we do.
Yeah, and that reminded me one of the other clinics you had successfully, and actually when we first connected a number of weeks or a month ago, I mean, the last time I said I had seen you
Yeah.
physically, you had put together, CF put together a fundraising event, which piggyback off of the Giants race that you talked about, which obviously I was heavily involved in from the
Oh
very
yeah.
concept of that. And Pac was at the booth and we were at the Pay Studios, but it was 2018, right? So
Yeah.
2018 or 2019? One of
It
the
was probably it's probably 19, but
2019, I think it was
that
September.
was the running clinic. You're talking about the running clinic we did
Running clinic, yeah. You guys, CAF
at
gets
Oracle
doors
Park.
open.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually on the ballpark, on the playing field.
Yeah.
All of the challenge athletes and the supporters out there, and you brought me in as well too as a guest coach, and that's something that quite frankly I would love to be able to do. I mean, I'm in Reno, Nevada now, but give me a little bit of lead time, Alan. It's something I would love to do, and I know you were out there doing the drill work. I've got photos of for
Yeah.
bribery purposes. I got photos of you out there and a number of other people. That was when Ed first was involved too. Creighton was there, I believe, as well too, and a number of athletes that I know that were part of that. So you guys have
Yeah.
you've done amazing things. and you've had great success since and I did not know that you, Alan Shanken, got involved with CAF, not by someone reaching out to you directly, is because you stopped by a damn booth at
Yeah.
the Escape from Alcatraz Triathlon, and those booths are outside on the Marina Green, whether it's foggy and windy as hell out, those booths are there. I
Yeah.
did not know that.
Yeah. It's kind of that's really how it's totally grassrootsy. I mean, and that's what it is. But the running clinic you mentioned and helping us was really that was a great thing. I mean, think about this. It was under the lights at Pac Bell Park.
Yes.
Maybe it was
Super
called
cool.
Oracle Park. I don't remember AT&T. I don't even know what it's called anymore.
Yeah.
I just know they have a losing record right now. I'm not happy about that. But they have had three World Series since I've been here. Um, but I'd say that it was really it was great, and so to give our athletes those kind of unique experiences, it's just plenty, honestly, to know that they're not alone. Like there's other people in this, on the ship with them. Like there's
Yeah.
other amputees, there's other people in wheelchairs, there's other people that have this common thread.
Yeah.
But to do it at Pac Bell Park, under the lights, feel totally committed to the event, that's a pretty big deal. A lot of fun.
Yeah. Pac Bell Park to SBC Park to AT&T Park to now it's Oracle Park. Just so you
Oracle Field. Okay, there you go.
okay. All right.
Whatever. I'm nostalgic.
Yeah. So that said, I'm with you on that, my friend. We're going to narrow it down. We're coming to the close here. So all of the impact that you've had, knowing how you first got involved and the amount of money that you have raised on behalf of CAF, and that money trickling down to athletes like me writing a letter for the grant for
Yeah.
his first prosthetic leg, which was Dr. Ed Blumenstock, who
Uh-huh.
we just referenced and talked about, who's racing Alcatraz in the coming weeks. I remember affectionately writing that in terms of numerous grant letters on
Yeah.
behalf of other athletes that I've coached, challenge athletes that I've coached. So in 2020,
Uh-huh.
which was the COVID year, there was something that I was not aware of until just because of this podcast here. You were the recipient of the Jim McLaren Award from CAF. And again, you mentioned this earlier. Jim McLaren he is the legacy. He is the driving force. He is the
Right.
DNA. He is the reason why the Challenge Athletes Foundation was created in the
Mhm.
first place. And just a quick summary on Jim McLaren for those that do not know, and I may or may not do this justice, but he was a very competitive, highly competitive athlete back in the day. He got involved in a motorcycle accident, if I recall correctly, and ended up having an amputee done where he had a prosthetic leg, but
Correct.
still at that point took that disability and continued to compete. And if anything, to do even more crazier things as a challenge athlete, which quite frankly, the term challenge athlete back in the day, I don't think it was even around at that point.
Yeah.
Disabled
Hmm.
athlete is probably more of what he was called, doing
Hmm.
tremendous things. Then tragically, he was struck during a triathlon event and then ended up becoming a quadriplegic.
Right.
And then with that, still kept and took that as another challenge and kept going forward. And tragically, he's no longer with us today. But that is the foundational athlete of
Hmm.
what CAF and their mission and their vision is all about. So it's a very powerful story. For those that do not know that, I would definitely read up on it. It brings you to emotional, sometimes, quite frankly, tears if you put it all in perspective, right?
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
with that,
Hmm.
you were awarded that award, and unbelievably deservedly so. And so I just wanted to kind of touch about that as we come to the conclusion of the episode here. Just
Um,
congratulations, my friend.
so yeah, so the Jim McLaren Award is given to the most influential volunteer to the organization for that particular year. And it was a real honor to receive it. I mean, it really was. And you know, I had an opportunity to really kind of crystallize my thoughts around what it really meant. Um, and it kind of made me feel like, any of the pain I had as a kid or the things that maybe I casted myself as a non-athlete or a non-team player or more of a spectator than a participant. It kind of made me feel like if I had any pain along the way or I didn't maximize my opportunity or it kind of made it feel like, you know what, the world has changed, and the risk, the gain I have in life was worth the pain I suffered then.
Yeah.
And it really sort of crystallized it, like, gosh, you know what? Um, as much as I wish my parents were still alive to have seen that, that was really a big void, because I really wish they would have been around. But
Yeah.
maybe that was the plan, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and again, I think touching on heartstrings, I mean, because I know that you during your sort of, I don't know if it's acceptance speech of the award or whatever, but it
Yeah,
touched me, it pulled the heartstrings. I mean, you dedicated it to your
yeah,
parents, right?
yeah. I did,
Dedicated the award to the
making me
parents.
cry a little bit, Jay.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
That's
just
not
the
part of the
power.
podcast. You said no
Yeah.
tears.
Yeah. That was my whole
No,
goal, is get Alan to cry here, everybody. No, that's not my
but
goal
but it,
whatsoever. But
but sure, right? You look back on your life, and I'm not, I'm not 22 anymore,
yeah.
and you look back and you go, there's, you look, your parents, if you you always feel the pain of your child, you never not do that, right? So it wasn't,
Yeah.
it wasn't as if I was in this, I did this by myself,
Yeah.
right?
No.
So, your parents feel the pain too, and they don't know how to handle a challenge athlete. Nobody's nobody's like prepared for that. It just sort of happens, and you do your best.
Yeah.
So, like I said, maybe that was the plan all along. Who knows? I mean, that's for another crazy conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do think that, I'm glad I got the award. Quite honestly, I'm happy for all the folks who do earn, the McLaren Award by CAF,
Yeah.
because I think that, we need committed, and we do have them committed, volunteers that make a difference.
Yeah, just powerful stuff. That said, there's more offshoots that I would love to have. Well, first and foremost, Alan, I'd love to have you not only on again on
Uh,
behalf of CAF, but quite frankly, I would love to have you on. Quite frankly, I think we talked about in the pregame show, maybe we bring on Dr. Ed onto the
yeah, sure.
show, hopefully successfully post successful finishing and crossing that line at the Escape from Alcatraz as my co-host, which I think would
Yeah,
be super fun. But what I want to
happy to
commit
do it.
to, is uh, I've been part of the CAF journey. I'm committing on this video podcast to still continuing to be part of that journey.
That'd be
So,
awesome.
where and when there's appropriate messaging events, things of that nature. Either Bob Babbitt, who's one of the co-founders of that. For those that are in the endurance space, everybody knows Bob Babbitt. Let's get him on the show if need be, if there's a important message there. Or Christine, who's in Whistle, who's the CEO now, acting CEO
Sure.
now. It's whatever we can do to help support that, and the audience hopefully will follow and support as well too. ChallengeAthletesFoundation.org, everybody. Alan, anything else you want to add to this?
No, I want to thank you for the time, Jay. It's just been so fun reconnecting, and uh, I know that, the organization's had a great impact on you. It's had a great impact on me, and I
Absolutely.
just think it's just a total game changer for lots of different reasons. So I just appreciate you taking the time to, have a little fun with this podcast.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. That is the conclusion of our Endurance Life 360 podcast. Thank you again, Alan Shanken, for your time and honesty, and quite frankly, just sharing your background, your history, your childhood. It's greatly appreciated. So, all
All
right,
right, man.
everybody. Cheers
Have
to
a good one.
everybody. Have a great day,
Thanks.
everybody. Cheers.
Bye bye.